That brings us to chapter 5. Now look at chapter 5. We're going to read the first 9 verses in a couple of minutes. But true biblical worship, the fourth element is this. True biblical worship centers on the cross of Christ's redeeming sacrifice. Centers. Redeem, redeemer, redemption. This concept is the greatest theme in the Bible. In fact, someone has put it this way. There are 1,189 chapters in the Bible. 2 chapters are about the world before it fell into sin. The other 1,187 chapters are all about God redeeming that fallen world and those fallen creations of His. Until we get to the last 2 chapters of the Bible, which are about worshiping the Redeemer. So redemption covers every chapter of the Bible except the first 2, and it's implied there because the Creator is introducing Himself. So our worship in heaven is focused on our Redeemer. And redemption is central to everything God's doing. Everything. And I want you to think of this. True biblical worship centers on the cross of Christ's redeeming sacrifice. So when God shows us worship in heaven, worship is in this holy atmosphere. Worship involves us giving to God a reflection of His holiness. He even tells us the words that He likes to hear. But then when we actually see ourselves offering that in unbroken worship, it centers on the one who redeemed us. That's the 4 elements all combined. So the content of true biblical worship is focused on redemption in heaven. They just can't, in heaven, get enough of saying thank you. What I should say is we who arrive there can't say enough of how thankful we are. Now, I want to demonstrate this to you with the first application. Application means we're getting close to going. It's so what do we do with what we've just heard? Application number 1. Redemption should always remind us of how unworthy we are for the price that Christ paid. When we think of redemption, think of being in debt over our heads, unable to pay it, and we're unworthy that He would die for us and pay our redemption. Now, when I was in school, in Bible college, they were kind of like Word of Life. They also said if you're going to graduate from the ministerial class, you have to learn to do soul winning. And so my job, I actually worked for the school for 5 years for Bob Jones University. And my job, I was a youth pastor there. I had the dormitory high school kids and the boys. And they said, teach them how to soul win. I said, okay, how do you do that? They said, we'll give you a bus, go to some mill town. South Carolina's filled with textile mills. And go there and try and lead people to the Lord. And I said, okay. So we'd get on the bus, and our target was to get them out of class, in time on the bus, to get down to, and our target was Clemson, Seneca, and Walhalla, 3 little cities in South Carolina. And we tried to arrive just as the plant, the mill, opened its gates and all the workers came out on Friday night. Why? Because all the workers got paid for the whole week with a check from the mill, and right outside the gate, right in front of the factory, was all bars. And the bars had blinking signs saying, checks cash free. Checks cashed, cash your check here. And what the men would do is they'd be hot and working 12-hour shifts, and they'd come out of the factory, go straight to the bar, hand them their check. They'd count out their entire week's wages in a great big stack in front of them. And they would start relaxing, and they'd drink, and then they'd drink a little more, and then they'd get a little happy, and they'd buy the guy next to them a drink. Pretty soon they were buying, You've watched enough Westerns. You can see them just spending their money at the local bar. And so we ran an interdiction ministry. What we did is we piled off the bus park, and we would go right to the plant, and we'd say, hey, have you been home yet? Why don't we go home? Well, I'll walk you home. And they go, well, I want to go. And I said, well, you know what? There are other places that cash checks. We'll walk with you. There are banks all over the place. And we would walk them home. And many of them, I've been in so many of these stilt shanty houses in these mill towns. You think slavery was it's still like slavery. They live in absolute squalor. And the eyes of those wives, I would never forget the looks on their faces when they would see us walking their husband home and he still had his check. Because they were living in poverty because their husbands spent it all at the bar. It would bring back whatever, as he staggered home, made it into his pocket. And we would sit down, they'd be eating their fried okra, which I thought was horrible, and they'd invite me because, they just saved $100, and they'd say, you want to stay? I say, oh, I'd love to stay. And I would be looking down through the slats to the dirt floor. You could see dirt through their floorboards of the ground underneath the stilt house. And I'd be sitting on this wobbly thing, and they'd give me my food, and often the husband would say, why do you care enough to do this? Which is, what are they asking? For us to share the gospel with them. And many times in these little shanty houses, our teens and all of us who led them would have the opportunity to lead these people to the Lord and introduce them. It didn't stop there. You'd introduce them to the local evangelical church, and they'd go to Bible study, and their whole lifestyle would change. And the husband would bring home, 100% of his pay instead of 60 or 40 or 30. But what happened is, for them, they understood debt. And when we explained to them that their real debt wasn't to the mill, but it was to God, and someone totally paid that price, they couldn't get over it.